by John Penrose, the Conservative MP for Weston-super-Mare, and the Prime Minister's anti-corruption champion. And John Penrose, William Wragg, the Conservative, and thank you very much for joining us, William Wragg, the Conservative chair of the Public Administration Committee, has called David Cameron's lobbying tasteless, slapdash and unbecoming. Do you agree?
Well, I desperately hope not, because I think that David Cameron has an awful lot of credits on his personal balance sheet, because after all, he was the guy who organised and hosted and originated the only so far ever global anti-corruption conference here in London in 2016. He's also the person who, and I, with respect to Kieran's comments about the shortcomings of the Lobbying Act, he actually got the Lobbying Act in place, good or bad, but there was very little in place there before. So I think
it doesn't appear to work very well.
Well, he will be mortified by what's happening at the moment, and I'm sure he will want to make his case and clear his name. But you are absolutely right to say it's now 7 years on. The world has changed, the world has moved on, and we now understand what works in the Lobbying Act, and there's plenty about it which does, but also, importantly, the stuff that doesn't. In fact, yesterday in Parliament, I was calling for some of the things that I think should be tightened up, should be improved, as I think both Kieran and Susan were saying.
And the things that don't work, for example, are when the former Prime Minister gets in contact with the Chancellor and says, can you help me out on behalf of a company that I'm working for?
Actually, what I was talking about yesterday was something broader, which is that at the moment we've got all these different sources of information, but for transparency to work properly, the sources of information have got to be understandable and you've got to be able to compare them. So, for example, you've got to be able to check the register of party donors, which is currently held by the Electoral Commission, with the with the register of members' interests in Parliament. You've got to be able to check those two against the list of who ministers have met, because then you can tell who's a lobbyist and who's not, and whose case they might be representing. And you've got to be able to do all of that and capture all the right people, because at the moment the list of who ministers meet only covers ministers and really the most senior civil servants. There's a whole slew of other people who probably ought to be included, like special political advisors, like other senior civil servants who are just below the rank of permanent secretary, who are currently left out entirely, but all of whom have influence. So there's a great deal which we now know should be tighter and could be tightened, and I think would make things immeasurably better.
And as the anti-corruption czar, are you shocked that every day there are new revelations across Whitehall about senior civil servants, about ministers, and do you think there's more to come?
I devoutly hope, like Kieran was saying earlier on, I devoutly hope there isn't, but what I am reassured by is that the reaction from both within Parliament, but also within Whitehall and within the government ministerial ranks as well, has been equally shocked and horrified, and there's been some pretty prompt action to say we've got to sort this out. So everybody from Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, announcing inquiries in the last 2 days, through to several different parliamentary select committees announcing their inquiries, through to the Cabinet Secretary Simon Case announcing his questions about double jobbing. This I think is healthy, because it means that we will know where the problems are, if they are widespread. I hope they're not, and I think that is ultimately, if the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, that's the right and healthy reaction. We've got to know what we're facing so that we can sort it out, and quickly.
And isn't it all very convenient that there was pressure on David Cameron and on ministers, current ministers, and now the spotlight has apparently moved to civil servants, and the Prime Minister seems very keen to push that, when in fact one of his aides, as we were talking about just earlier with Nick Watt, Lord Udalister, he was doing very similar things when he was in number 10.
I think you are vastly overstating the degree of control that any one person in government or outside it has had over the revelations that have come to light over the course of the last couple of weeks. I don't think there's no Mephistophelian genius directing the press or directing the nation's attention on this. We are turning over rocks and uncovering things, and I don't think there's anything more to it than that.
John Penrose, thank you very much.